Good evening and welcome to our admissions volunteer update for fall 2014. My name is Karen Putt and I'm the Associate Director of Alumni and Parent Relations for the Enrollment Division and part of our recruitment and communication team. We're glad you joined us this evening, and we'll go over quickly what the agenda is for our program tonight. I'll give a quick volunteer update and then we'll go into an admissions update with Brian Lohr, who's our Director of Admissions Operation and Management. Financial aid update with Michael Remke, Associate Director of Financial Aid, an athletics compliance update with Heidi Ubelor, who's the Director of Compliance, and then we'll end with some questions. You'll have the opportunity to key in questions during the broadcast, but we won't have a chance to answer the questions until everybody's done with their update. We don't anticipate being here longer than an hour tonight, but we will take as much time as we need to answer all of the questions. First of all, for the alumni volunteer overview, we've created a new team, which we're calling APART, which is the Alumni and Parent Admissions Recruitment Team. And this name came out of just the idea that our volunteers are a part of the team recruiting future Notre Dame students. And we're very thankful that our volunteers help set Notre Dame apart from other schools when students are considering. We're also changing the name of our Alumni Schools Committee or Alumni Schools Coordinator. We hear those different names all the time, and we're going to land on the name Admission Volunteer Coordinators, or AVCs. So it's not too much of a difference from what you're used to in the past, and really this came out of the need for people not identifying with what the ASC title was, and we wanted something that people could identify with a little bit more. Over the past year, we've been doing an assessment of our training and resources that we offer our volunteers, and part of this Alumni and Parent Admissions Recruitment Team is a new website, which is live right now, and we'll be sending out notification about it tomorrow to all volunteers, and it's apart.nd.edu. And again, that site is live, so if you'd like to check it out tonight, you can feel free to log in after the session and see what's out there. But this is a site for all of our volunteers. And part of what this whole recruitment team is not just our ABCs, but it's our diversity support through the Alumni Diversity Boards, our club scholarship coordinators, our ND on Air participants, and other alumni and parent volunteers that we have. There's a whole training section which provides training briefs for all volunteers. So the old PDF handbook that you received is now broken into more manageable chunks, where you'll be able to read just about financial aid overview, financial aid definitions, responsibilities for alumni volunteer coordinators, just a whole host of different subjects. That's on the training section of the apart.nd.edu website. We also allow the layout so you can share appropriate training briefs with volunteers. So if you have somebody attending a college fair, you'll be able to go ahead and send them the link to the college fair training and they'll review it. And in the coming weeks, we'll send more information about our training program. We do have a training completion form that we're hoping that all volunteers sign. And really, this is what the training comes out of is requests from volunteers. And we just want to make sure that you are going to college fairs and talking to students with the confidence to provide consistent and accurate information. Next, we'll move into our admissions overview, and I'll turn it over to Brian.
Good, thanks Karen, and thanks for all your work putting this together. This is great. I am a week away from putting in my first full year at the undergraduate admissions. I spent the first 17 years over at the Graduate Business School, Mendoza. So it's been a great year, and I've learned a great deal, and we had a very good year. We had 17,901 applications, which was a slight increase over the previous year. We admitted 3,785 students, and that was about 150 less than we had the prior year. And our hope there was that we would be able to go to the wait list, which thankfully we were able to do. We waitlisted about 1,400 students, and we admitted about 65 students in total off the wait list, with 63 coming our way. So we were very happy with that. The class of 2018, we had a 52-48 split between male and female. Our ethnic minority was 25%. Alumni children was 23%. That was a little bit up from the prior year. Our international component was almost 6%, but 5.5. First generation students were at 9%. Our Catholic heritage was at 81%, which was slightly lower than we had the prior year. And the siblings were about 15%. So that brought together the class of 2018. Very good diversity from a high school standpoint. We had 1,300 high schools represented, with 42% from both public and Catholic schools, and 16% from other schools, private schools primarily. So new policies for this year are as follows. We have gone to a restrictive early action beginning this fall. Essentially, this is designed for students that have early decision applications at other schools. Essentially, if they're applying early decision, which is a binding contractual transaction, we ask that they not apply to Notre Dame. So restrictive early action is a new component for us this fall. And secondly, I wanted to kind of go through a quick matrix of what that means. So as students come up and talk to you about the admissions process, these are the FAQs, the frequently asked questions. Can I apply EA to other schools? The answer there is yes. You can apply to as many EA schools as you want to. Can I apply restrictive early action to other schools? The answer there is yes as well. Can I apply early decision elsewhere? The answer there is no. What are the possible outcomes? So for restrictive early action, they're the same as they were before. Students are either admitted, they're denied, and that's a final decision, or we can defer them to regular action. Can I apply to an ED2 school if I'm deferred? And the answer there is yes. Can I apply to an ED2 school if I'm admitted? The answer is no. And last but not least, can I apply to an ED2 school if I apply regular decision? And the answer there is yes. So that's a fairly significant change to our early action policy. Secondly, the Mendoza College of Business. We have gone to a cap for Mendoza. We found that within the first week of school, we would have between 100 and 150 students that had applied under a major intent other than business transfer into business. So what that did is it put tremendous amount of pressure on the Mendoza College of Business. And so for this year, we've gone to a cap, and we will pre-approve about 550 students coming into the Mendoza College of Business. And this is a new aspect for us, and we're excited to see how this unfolds. We're in the process of gaining applications now. We have offered our students through the Common App the ability to select Mendoza College of Business as a primary major, and then they'll also have an opportunity to pick a secondary major. If business is their sole intent, they'll also have the option to identify that. So this will allow us to bring the enrollment in the Mendoza College of Business into a better alignment with the rest of the colleges in the School of Architecture. So currently, Notre Dame on the Road, we are very excited about our counselors that are out on the road right now. We've had about a 20% increase in the confirmed visits for Notre Dame on the Road, and with about the same size staff. So we're very excited about that. They're working very, very hard, and we're excited to see the results of those during the application process. So that's the update from admissions, and I'll turn it over to Michael Remke.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. Whenever we're talking about financial aid, the starting point for us is always the average cost of attendance for a student. So that's our starting point. So just to share some figures for the current academic year for 2014-15, this is the average cost of attendance for the undergraduate students here. The only thing that really changes in this scenario is the transportation line. Because we have students coming from all over the world and obviously all over the United States, we do adjust that transportation budget based on where the student is traveling from to get to school and then also to get back home. So that's the only component of the budget that typically would change from student to student. So again, when we're talking about financial aid, we're always starting with the cost of attendance for a student. Notre Dame is still 100% committed in meeting the full demonstrated financial need of all the undergraduate students here, the domestic students. The only exception, we're need aware for international undergraduate students, but for domestic undergraduate students, we're fully committed to meet 100% of their demonstrated financial need, as shown through the 2 applications that we require students to fill out. 74% of the students who apply for aid do receive some type of need-based financial aid. That can be a need-based loan, but it is 74% of the students that do apply do receive some aid that is considered need-based. And when you look at the incoming freshman class, there's just under $29 million that is given out in scholarships to the incoming freshman class this current year. We also have $1.8 million in the freshman class who are receiving merit-based awards. The university is relatively new in the merit-based arena, but we're still focused on the need-based financial aid, but we are growing a little bit in the merit-based. It will always be a smaller component of the overall budget, probably 3 to 4%. But it is something that we realize to be competitive for some of those highly desirable students, we have to be in the merit scholarship arena. When you look at the average federal loan debt that a student graduates from Notre Dame as an undergraduate, we're right around just under $21,000. So that's a very reasonable loan debt for students to graduate from Notre Dame with. We're a little bit higher compared to some of our peers, but not significantly. Some other statistics to share. For this past academic year, we had $115 million in need-based scholarships that were awarded to our undergraduate students. And 99% of our first-year students returned for their second year. When you look at the average scholarship amount a freshman is receiving, it's around that $32,500 mark. So again, you're taking that right off the top of the cost of education or cost of attendance for a student. So that's a little bit over 50% when you're looking at the cost of attendance for the average scholarship that an incoming freshman is getting. Then when you look at the average need-based loan that a student is getting, we're about $4,200. A need-based loan is either a direct subsidized loan or a federal Perkins loan. So when you're looking at the average for an incoming freshman, we're at about $4,200. When you're talking to families about the cost of education at Notre Dame, obviously it's not an inexpensive school to attend, but with our resources that we have to meet full demonstrated need, we need to kind of also fold in the value of the education that they're receiving here. So you need to talk to them about what they're getting besides just the education. Obviously they're getting a stellar education here academically through the rigor and the courses they're taking, but they're also getting a chance to experience their spiritual side through various activities on campus, and then also cultural activities from around the world. We are growing the diversity on campus and also the international. There's a growth in that. So the exposure that the students are getting is another asset that they're getting, and it contributes to the value of a Notre Dame education. So also some statistics to go along with the value on the next slide are, some of the outcomes from the education that they receive here. 96% of our students graduate on time. This is a phenomenal rate. So we're in the top 3% of the nation when it comes to graduation rates for undergraduate students. And then when you also look, you see 98% of our students are successful in finding career opportunities within 6 months of graduation. This is also another phenomenal statistic. Now, career opportunities could mean going on to graduate school or to another professional school, but they are finding something within 6 months of graduation to move their career forward. Also, when you look at the statistics of our graduates who are admitted, pre-med students who are admitted into a medical school, we're nearly twice the national average at 75%. So that's, again, another thing to sell as a value of a Notre Dame education. Also, the amount of interviews and employers that visit campus here at Notre Dame, there's phenomenal opportunities for the undergraduate students to have opportunities for employment post-graduation here at Notre Dame. We also have the phenomenal alumni network that is a huge component of making those connections to receive a job for students post-graduation. Just to talk in basics about some deadlines for filing for financial aid. These are pretty consistent with what they have been in the past. We do strongly encourage all incoming freshman students to apply for financial aid. A lot of people want a quick answer. If I make X, am I going to get Y? It's not that simple. I wish it was. It'd be a lot. Our job would be a lot easier, but it also would be not as fair to the general population of students. So when you look at the deadlines that we're asking for the incoming freshmen, we do require 2 applications. So our priority deadline is February 15th for them to fill out their free application for federal student aid using the school code that's on the slide. This is an application that we use to determine federal eligibility. So this is what we use to determine a student's federal eligibility for student loans or for a Pell Grant or an SEOG grant. It's also for some states that have resources to disperse aid. It's also the application that many of the states use to disperse state aid. We are also an institution that uses the CSS financial aid profile from the College Board, again with the school code on the screen and the same deadline of February 15th. This is what Notre Dame uses to determine the institutional gift aid that we award students. This application actually gives us a 3-year history of the family's either financial weaknesses or their strengths. So it's a lot more detailed than the free application for federal student aid. It really gives us the ability to do a holistic approach to a family's financial situation when we're determining their financial need. Part of the component of the CSS financial aid profile application is something called IDOC, which this is where we ask families to submit to the College Board, for the most part, copies of their tax returns and W-2s, which enable us to do the verification of the applications that they're submitting. The priority deadline for that is the 1st of March of every year for incoming freshmen. And now I will turn it over to my colleague Heidi to cover athletic compliance.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you and good evening. Thanks for joining us. Notre Dame is a member of the National Collegiate Athletic Association, commonly referred to as the NCAA, which is the governing body for 1,100 institutions nationwide. And what that means is that the NCAA prepares and passes new legislation on an annual basis, rules that we all essentially have to follow in order to comply and make sure that our future and our current student athletes are eligible for competition at Notre Dame or elsewhere. These rules are incredibly complex and they're very important. So I want to briefly give you an overview of those that might touch you in your current role as a university representative. Notre Dame, as a member institution, sponsors 730 student athletes in 26 sports. Our office is charged with interpreting these many rules, with educating all of our constituents, which include those 730 student athletes, 75 coaches, 250 members of our athletics department, all of our constituents across campus, the community, and quite frankly, the world when it comes to our fans and our boosters. It's a big task. Not only are we interpreting those rules, educating people, we're also monitoring who's following them and how. So our office does stand as a kind of an avenue to protect our current student athletes and our programs, but we do ask for your help on a daily basis. The rules are very complex. Like I said, annually the NCAA releases new rules. Our rule book is 315 pages deep. In addition to that rule book, we have thousands of NCAA interpretations that are released even on a daily basis. So it is very complex, and certainly you should rely on our office as a resource. I want to define a prospective student athlete. Given your role, obviously you're interacting with prospects at college fairs and beyond. The NCAA has a very broad definition of a prospective student athlete. In fact, they define it as anyone who's entered the 9th grade, anyone who's ever been provided a benefit who's younger than the 9th grade, by an institution, and in particular their athletics department, or anyone who's enrolled at a junior college or prep school. Well, obviously that covers every interaction that you probably have as you're dealing with your day-to-day job. So we do say that please conduct business as usual. As you're working a college fair, for instance, if you tend to hand out pens and brochures and even t-shirts and magnets, treat prospective student athletes or those that identify themselves as recruits, particularly for athletics at Notre Dame, as you would any other prospect who is looking to attend Notre Dame. The only difference would be is at send-off events or any event in which you've invited any prospect. You can also invite athletics recruited prospects as well. You're just not identifying them as such to the crowd. And that way we're not opening the door for them to be approached and to begin those conversations that can, quite frankly, turn into recruiting conversations that would be illegal or not following NCAA rules. So again, business as usual, provide them anything that you would provide any other student or prospective student. So for instance, if you send anyone a congratulatory email upon being admitted to Notre Dame, or a congratulatory phone call, that should continue, and it should occur with recruited prospective student athletes as well for varsity athletics. Same with send-off events. You're inviting any confirmed enrollees, just as you would any other enrolled students who intend to attend Notre Dame. One caveat, though, is that the NCAA does have a rule that only countable athletic coaches are allowed to recruit athletically on Notre Dame's behalf. I can't recruit athletically on Notre Dame's behalf, and nor can you. So should a conversation, and these conversations will occur, we expect you to have these relationships or these certainly question and answer sessions with these prospects at events. That's essentially the nature of what you're doing. Should it turn toward recruiting for a varsity athletic team, please refer them to one of our coaching staffs or one of our programs. Please know that prospects and their families can call our coaches unlimitedly. The NCAA does allow them to call. Should a coach answer the phone, or a director of ops, or whomever that person might be, they can answer any questions and talk to them. Now, NCAA rules do limit interaction with our coaches, with prospects, until a certain time period where coaches cannot contact them via telephone, email, text message, or any other manner until a particular date for a particular sport. So do reiterate that coaches cannot contact them until a particular time. However, they should reach out to our coaches and our programs to receive further information. Again, we are a resource, so I do want to provide our information. We obviously can be reached via telephone, via email. We have an excellent website with quite a few resources on it for prospects in general, and for Notre Dame fans, boosters, colleagues, whatnot. Please check that out, or follow us on Twitter at Irish Compliance. Thank you.
Great, and now we can move into the questions and answers. I think it's been definitely very informative, and hopefully it's been giving you some information that you can use at college fairs, or that you've stumbled upon as you've been doing college fairs already this season. While I keep going through our questions that have been coming in, Michael, I'm going to toss the first one over to you. And you mentioned merit-based scholarships, and how do students apply for merit aid? I know that's a question that comes up a lot during conversations with alumni.
So there is not a specific application for merit aid. A student will be considered for merit aid, and if there's additional information we need from a student, we will reach out to the student or the family to get additional information. The only exception to that is for the Hesburgh-USCO merit scholarship, and I would encourage you to look at the hesburghusco.org website for the information for application procedures on that and deadlines. But for the rest of the merit scholarships here at Notre Dame, there's no separate application. You just fill out the FAFSA and you fill out the CSS profile, and then financial aid in conjunction with the admissions office will make those determinations about eligibility for merit scholarships.
Great. Another question has come in, and somebody was still not clear on the REA, ED, and ED2, and I agree, it's definitely a tough one to get. I'm going to go back to the slide really quick that Brian, you had we had gone over with the differences in it. But with that, I guess if you can give a little bit more information, especially ED2. That one is kind of new to me as well.
Yeah, essentially, early decision is a binding situation with the students. So what we found was that students were applying early decision to other schools and early action to Notre Dame, and they were being admitted to those early decision schools. And we never had a chance at them. We never had a chance to get them to come to Notre Dame. And so essentially, if a student is applying early decision, we ask that they not apply to Notre Dame restrictive early action. So ED2 schools, if we defer a student, early decision 2 is the second deadline of early decision. And so if a student is deferred from restrictive early action, they can apply ED2 to another school. I don't know if that answers Bill's question or not, but
yeah.
Early decision is binding, and we wanted to prohibit students from applying early decision at other schools and also applying early action in Notre Dame.
Okay. And I think essentially the restrictive early action, and on our side, it's not changing things that much.
It's not, no. It's not changing very much at all. Our deadline is November 1. We're going to have decisions out to students by early December, about December 11th, maybe a little bit later than that. And then students will have until May 1st to confirm their seat at Notre Dame. So in many respects, things have not changed.
Okay, and it's only from what I understand, the difference is, as you mentioned, they just can't apply to a school that's binding early decision.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Hopefully that helps, Bill, with your question. Looks like we have one for Heidi. What happens if one of the prospective athletes identifies himself and others at the event approach the prospective athlete? Mm-hmm. So if they come in and say, I'm going to be a soccer player, and then how did that conversation go from there?
Great question, and probably pretty likely. When you sit at an event, you're talking to those at your table or those around you, and that would be a perfect way to describe yourself as, yes, I'm attending Notre Dame and I'm going to be a varsity athlete. When that occurs, it's very difficult to control conversations. The most that we can do is educate those that we have control over. So certainly your group or those that do visit our website and read our verbiage and those types of rules. If you don't have knowledge of a rule, certainly there is still an opportunity to break it. But know that the rule is only broken if an individual attempts to actively recruit a prospective student athlete to participate in a varsity sport at Notre Dame. So we get the question all the time. I know of a great kicker in my hometown. What do I do to get him noticed? Refer it to the football program at that point, and remove yourself from the scenario. And then at that point, you allow the family, the friends, or the family and the prospective student athlete to take over. It doesn't mean that when we're asked questions that we who love Notre Dame can't candidly answer them. But if it gets into a recruiting conversation, will I be a good fit on the football team? What do you think of Brian Kelly? Will I earn a scholarship? Things of that sort. We couldn't possibly answer anyway. So those are the types of questions where I would hope that anyone would say, oh, well, I would refer you to that particular coach or that program. So it is difficult to control, no doubt about it. But right. Those of us that have been educated, have an obligation to follow the rule.
Okay. And I think just to go a little bit deeper, say that it is a student send-off and the person says, I'm Jane Smith, I'm going to be playing soccer, and somebody comes up and starts talking to them about, oh, I'm a soccer fan, I go to the games, and has a conversation, but they've already confirmed they're planning on attending. Yeah.
The recruitment's over at that point.
Okay.
So I worry a lot less. And it's true that early on, when we hear of these verbal commits as a sophomore or a junior who haven't either signed their national letter of intent, they're not entering their senior year, and truly committed to Notre Dame, that's where it makes us a little more nervous, especially if it happens at our own events or on our own campus. But there's only so much that you can get your arms around. And that's why we don't go about publicly stating this is Jane Doe and she is going to play soccer at Notre Dame, we would limit it to this is Jane Doe and she's from Granger, Indiana.
Right.
And that way we're not presenting the opportunity for someone to recruit on Notre Dame's behalf athletically, but perhaps that conversation takes place on the side, and there's very little control we can have of that.
Okay. I think that clarifies things, definitely. There's a couple financial aid questions, so I'll toss them to you, Michael. One is, are ROTC scholarships considered need-based or merit-based?
Okay, so that's a unique situation. So an ROT scholarship would go against the institutional need for a student. So as I mentioned, we have 2 applications that the families fill out, and there are 2 calculations that are done. So there's a federal eligibility and there's an institutional eligibility. So the ROTC would go against the institutional eligibility, however, it would not go against the federal eligibility. So for most students that are getting a full ROTC scholarship, they have very limited eligibility left for additional university scholarship. However, they still have the eligibility for their federal loans and potentially a Pell Grant. So that, I can't really categorize it as need or merit, but it does have different impacts on whether it's the federal eligibility or the institutional eligibility. So the best scenario I could give you is the one of, you know, a student being on full ROTC and it really taking away the university scholarship that they would have been eligible for. However, they could still borrow their federal eligibility in loans. So for most students on ROTC, it's covering their tuition fees and potentially their room and board as well. So it does impact their institutional scholarship, but it doesn't have any impact on their federal eligibility because it just goes on top.
Okay, and I'll just jump in, and we do have one staff member on the admissions team that deals with the ROTC interests, and so we can always put that person in touch, you know, with you, and we can add that to on the resource section of our new website. And then also, anytime you have any kind of question like this on the financial aid side, the idea is for us to give you enough information to cover the basics of financial aid. But our financial aid team is here and at the ready to answer any kind of in-depth questions with students themselves.
Right, so I'd always defer a specific question like that back to the financial aid office where we could address that specifically for the family to look at the circumstances that they have.
Yeah, and we can provide more information a little bit on the ROTC, what to say if a student has interest in ROTC, but again, we would, you know, want you to cover the basics. Yes, you know, we do have an ROTC program. You know, people are eligible every year, but we can throw it back to the admission office or the financial aid office.
Yeah. And we are one of the few schools that has the 4 branches of ROTC as well, so we're kind of an anomaly on that one.
Great. Okay, looks like we have a Mendoza question, which I knew that we would get. There's a couple of them actually. So Brian, I'm going to ask you. Keith from St. Louis asked, if you plan on pre-approving 550 for Mendoza, is that an intended enrollment, or do you expect a lower yield?
Yeah, that's a very good question. We're heading down a new path, right? So this is a brand new policy that we have in place, and we don't know what that's going to do to the yield. Our intent, though, is to have a graduating class of 550 students per year. And so what we had was, because of that imbalance, the classroom instruction, the small class sizes were very, very difficult to have. We were just oversubscribed. It also limited the students from the other colleges in the School of Architecture from taking courses in Mendoza. And that just goes against what we want to do. We want a well-rounded student coming out of Notre Dame, and because of the high enrollment numbers within Mendoza, that was prohibited, and we weren't able to do that. And so that was certainly a challenge. But we anticipate learning as we go through this policy. We will have a limited number of seats available for students to transfer into Mendoza, both internally and externally to the university, and we're going to continue to monitor that as we go through. One thing that I want to express, and I may not have done this as clearly as I could have earlier, but in the Common App, when students go to apply, they are going to be asked what their major intent is. If they select business, there will be a dialogue box that comes up that says, be advised, the seats to the Mendoza College of Business are limited, and it's a competitive situation. The next question that comes up is business your sole intent? Yes or no? If they pick yes, then we know that business, Mendoza College of Business is their sole intent. But they also have an opportunity to say, no, I'm also interested in whatever it may be, arts and letters and an English major. And so that's going to provide a little bit more flexibility, I think, in their application. But bottom line, we're still admitting to the University of Notre Dame. We're not admitting to a particular school. That's a secondary aspect. But we had to employ this new policy in order to maintain a consistent level of student coming into those different programs.
Okay, and there's a follow-up question from Tom Sclafani from Fort Lauderdale, and says the restriction on entry Mendoza appears inconsistent with the benefit of the first year of studies program. And rather than have business intents be pre-approved, why not judge admission to Mendoza based on academic performance during freshman year?
That's the latter part of that, Tom, is certainly what we're going to do for the transfer students, is to look at their academic performance. But they're going to be very high caliber students, just like the entire class that comes into Notre Dame. Students that elect not to pursue the pre-approval in Mendoza can go to any of the other colleges and School of Architecture if that's of interest to them. So there is flexibility that way. But we're entering a new path, so we don't know exactly how this is going to unfold, but we're monitoring it very closely. The applications that we've received so far, about 55% of those students that have applied that have business as their intended first major also provide a second major. So there's going to be some analysis that will take place during that process.
Okay, great. We have a couple more compliance questions coming in. Brian's asking, is there a form online for an interested student athlete to fill out to express their interest to the coaches? He's heard of other schools that have this.
Absolutely. In most sports, we have questionnaires available on UND.com on the sport tab, and then click recruits. As I said, most sports. Now, some sports, as you can imagine, are inundated or were inundated with questionnaires when they did have them live on their site. So I can think of at least a handful, such as women's basketball, football, men's basketball, in which they do not post a questionnaire, but they do encourage those interested parties to contact their office in order to have a questionnaire sent to them. Great question.
Okay, and we also have provided on our training website a one-page training brief on compliance and also a one-page sheet on the coach's athletic information as well. So if you have questions, about what coach to contact, we have that information out there. And now another compliance question. This is from Matt from Toledo. Suppose as a teacher there's an outstanding athlete at my school who's a strong character and is a top student. Is it unacceptable to say to him or her, have you considered Notre Dame? Perhaps you should contact the coach. Here is his or her number.
I think you should definitely do that, and you can definitely do that. When we say that we are not permitted to recruit athletically on Notre Dame's behalf, the NCAA has a rule that states that boosters cannot contact prospective student athletes or their families or their friends to try and recruit them on behalf of Notre Dame athletically. So we shouldn't initiate contact with those that we don't already know. Now, certainly we're going to have relationships with people that we do know in your classroom. It might be a niece and nephew, your own sons and daughters, who obviously you would provide advice to, and we completely expect that, and that's an exception to the rule. What we ask you not to do is reach out to just that great tennis athlete in your hometown who you don't know and suggest Notre Dame and start to speak to them about recruiting opportunities or athletics at Notre Dame.
Great. That's a great question. We have a couple more financial aid ones that came through. Joanne from Chicago asked if it's a merit scholarship, why does someone need to complete the financial aid info to be considered?
Okay, so somebody doesn't need to complete the financial aid information to be considered for merit. Although we do encourage all families to fill out the financial aid applications, that's just to give them the broadest perspective of what they're potentially eligible for. If a family chooses not to apply, they're still considered in the merit pool. But one thing to understand, there's no separate application for a merit scholarship, but if you choose to not apply for financial aid, you will still be considered in the merit pool of candidates.
And am I correct in understanding that Notre Dame will reach out to the students?
Correct. So many of our merit scholarships, the students will need to potentially submit additional information, be it a video that we ask them to do or some other information that we're trying to obtain. If a student has not filed for financial aid, that does not preclude us from reaching out to the family to get that additional information that we're wanting to consider them for the merit scholarship.
Okay, great. And then there's a couple follow-up on the ROTC questions. So Bob from New Hampshire is asking if ROTC scholarships are not included in the financial numbers that we had listed for financial aid.
Okay, so those are not considered in the need-based numbers. That is correct.
Okay.
Those are additional dollars that come in.
Okay, and this one might be for Brian or Michael. And how does a student identify himself as interested in ROTC on the Common App?
Do you know, Michael, do you know how that is expressed?
Well, I believe there's a field or something they can check on the Common App, and then that also, there's a trigger in the system, I think, that then feeds through to the financial aid application, I believe.
It gets, yes, it gets coded as an ROTC prospective student, but it should be noted that ROTC will actually go out and recruit all of the admitted students to Notre Dame. They will send information on the ROTC scholarships after the class is admitted and sent.
Right. And so the financial aid office works closely with the different ROTC branches, and we're getting lists and rosters and eligibility and approval of those scholarships throughout the year. So for incoming freshmen, there's a physical component that they have to pass a physical examination and other tests. So even though they're considered being considered for ROTC, we may not know about that until well into the semester. And there are changes going on all throughout the academic year from the ROTC rosters. So
absolutely,
we work very closely with all of the branches.
We do. Shannon Kelly in our admitting office is the key contact for ROTC. But it should be noted that if the student can also express that to the area representative that handles their particular high school, and that will be communicated back up through Shannon, and the student will be coded properly within the system.
Great. Okay, it looks like we have a couple more on the restrictive early action, early decision deadlines. So somebody's asking, is binding early action the same as early decision?
Yes, the answer to that is yes.
Okay.
And then on the second question there about ED2 timeline, the same as regular action, the answer there is yes as well. Yeah, this is all through the Common App, so typically that early decision, restrictive early action will be the November 1 timeframe, and then regular decision will be January 1.
Okay, great.
Hope that helps.
Yeah, so here's another compliance question. If a club supports a varsity team on its visit to the club area, can an individual provide his or her own support or provide more money than the club provides from its treasury?
Yes, please. That's the easy answer. We love alumni clubs and all of their members. So you probably noticed that when teams travel, our alumni clubs often support teams with meals or even hosting student athletes and coaches in their homes. And we think this is terrific. The NCAA does have one silly rule that precludes us, and we get creative with this rule, and it does state that a booster, and I cannot guarantee that every alumni club member is technically a booster, but that a booster can only provide a student athlete a meal in their home or on our campus. So therefore, you'll notice that alumni clubs will often host our student athletes in their home when we're attending team travel, and we love that. When it comes to eating in restaurants or having a meal catered elsewhere than in a home or on our campus, What we do suggest is that we take a donation on the front end for the cost of that said meal, and then the Alumni Club or any boosters can certainly entertain with our student athletes and our coaches at a restaurant, and we will gladly accept their money on the front end. We'll then pay for the meal so that we're following the NCAA rule, and then we send our great thank you afterwards, and we've had a terrific event with a potential booster with Alumni Club members, and still have that opportunity to interact like we should be. So yes, we will take donations at any point. Certainly we want them to go to the program, never to an individual student athlete, because that would jeopardize their eligibility.
Okay. You weren't kidding when you said the rule book was over 300 pages.
It's thick.
Okay, we've got another one, it looks like, on the Mendoza policy from Don, and it says, can a Notre Dame student transfer into Mendoza after the freshman year of studies without having mentioned this Mendoza or business interest on the initial Common App?
The answer there is yes. It will be a limited number of seats. We anticipate it to be a highly competitive process. There are going to be a large number, we feel, of students that want to transfer into Mendoza, but it's going to be a smaller number.
Okay. Great. We're getting through questions, so if anybody else has a couple more questions, please feel free to type them in. We have a couple procedure questions. One is, can we get copies of the slides, or where can we find them online? We'll post the slides as well as the recording of this video on the new website, apart.nd.edu. And tomorrow we will be sending out, as I mentioned, an email to all of our volunteers announcing the website and everything. So we'll make sure that these are up there. All of the information we presented today is in a training brief on the website. So we have a whole admissions section with data, we have a whole athletics compliance section, and of course a whole financial aid section. And we've tried to provide more information than we had in the past, and again, make it in one-page PDFs that are a little bit more manageable to read at one point rather than paging through a whole process manual. And also Dave is asking, this is great and informative, thank you. We were hoping that was the response to this. And can we do it possibly earlier every year? And yes, we do plan on doing this kind of webcast, if not more than once a year, at least once a year, probably in August, and most likely on a Sunday night, so we can make sure that it works for more volunteer schedule. This year we did this in response to getting some questions coming in about college fairs, and especially with our new policies. So we will definitely be doing this kind of broadcast on an annual basis. And it will be part of our whole training program that we'll give you more information about. So we've got another question about ED2. So Matt is still confused about ED2. And are there 2 cycles for early decision? Are some early decision deadlines later than Notre Dame's November 1st restrictive early action deadline?
So let's see here. Are some early decision deadlines later than Notre Dame's November 1st? I would say, I don't know all the deadlines for all the various schools. I would imagine that there might be a difference there, right, between the different deadlines. But one of the things that the Common Application does is it will restrict those things from happening, right? So if you apply early decision to again, that's binding to a school, it will not allow you to apply to restrictive early action. So there are some procedural aspects of the Common App that will prohibit some of those things. Again, I don't know all the various deadlines, and
okay.
But it's again, it's a new policy for us, and we're going to continue to work through that.
And then just going back to the part about ED2, can you just again talk about? It seems like there's some confusion about early decision 2, regular. So what that 2 component, I think, is new that a lot of volunteers are hearing for the first time.
The early decision 2.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, I don't know exactly what I can add to what I've already said there. I'm not exactly sure what I can add there, other than the ED2 school is the second round of early decision.
So, and I'm trying to kind of understand and help out too. So there's a school could have an early decision 1 deadline, and then they could have an early decision 2 deadline.
Right.
So, you know, say October 1st is their early decision, and then November 1st would be their...
It could be whatever
the dates are.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of in their admission cycle, well, we just have restrictive early action and regular decision.
Exactly.
Then another school might have early decision 1, early decision 2, and then regular.
It could very well.
Okay.
Right. So.
Okay. That's...
Yeah, clear as mud. And if, you know, I am a resource, so if it's not clear, feel free to contact me in the office, and I'm happy to gather more information on that and get that out, and we can supplement our slides here as well.
Okay.
So we can do that going forward.
We've got a question. You mentioned School of Architecture. Is the application to that school also separate?
No, it's not. They would continue to use the Common App. They would also have the ability to submit projects through Slide Room that would be forwarded on to the various School of Architecture or Arts and Letters or wherever that might be,
Okay.
so that they could be evaluated from a skills standpoint. And that holds true for music as well.
Okay,
So
and Slide Room is just another application within the app?
Exactly.
Where they can share music or their portfolios?
Yeah, exactly. So it's through the Common App, they would be asked if they have any supplemental materials that they would like to submit, and then they would be directed to Slide Room where they could upload those things,
Okay.
both audio and visual.
Right. So speaking of the School of Architecture, that is a 5-year program. So
Yes.
A question you might get is, how does that impact a student's financial aid? That is one of the 2 programs that we do support students for 5 years. The typical policy for undergraduate students is that Notre Dame's financial aid office will support them for 8 semesters, 4 academic years, with the exception of any approved 5-year program at the university, one of them being the School of Architecture, and then the other one being the Combination Engineering and Arts and Letters program called the Riley program. So those 2 programs, we do support students need-based for 5 years of education.
Okay. This is a kind of a marketing question. It's when will we have QR codes on our brochures and literature? And so that would be able to send students to videos or web links from their cell phones. And that's actually something I can take to my manager, Joyce Lance, who's our Director of Recruitment Communications, and ask her about. We're also looking into, many of you at College Fairs reported in that people are using scanners, that students have a code and they go around and you just scan the information rather than giving them a literature to come back and fill out on the website. So we're investigating that as well. A question for financial aid: what is a yellow ribbon school as far as what might be available for military children?
Okay, so Notre Dame does have an agreement with the Department of Veterans Affairs to process. We do have the yellow ribbon eligibility here. So we have a couple of staff members here in the office that kind of oversee that program. But we do have an arrangement where we do a match. There's a part that comes in from the Veterans Affairs, and then there's a part that Notre Dame puts in for those students. But I would encourage families, if you're coming across those, to send an email inquiring for more specifics and a deeper understanding about that to finaid@nd.edu. It's a very complicated process, but we are a school that we do have an agreement with the Department of Veterans Affairs to process Yellow Ribbon scholarships. We have that at the undergraduate level. We also have arrangements in the MBA schools and the law school as well as graduate school. But primarily we do the undergraduates.
Great. Here's another admission question. Why does ND not take the ACT SuperScore?
Yeah, very simply, ACT, through their analysis, indicates that that one test is a better reflection of the student's ability at that one time. So they recommend that you not SuperScore, and we follow that recommendation.
And can you explain for some that might not know what SuperScore is?
Right. So as an example, SAT does allow you to SuperScore, allows the student to SuperScore, and that would mean that they could take the best math result on one test day and couple that with the best critical reading result on another test day. And so those two combined would develop the composite score or the final score. But ACT doesn't recommend that, and we follow that recommendation.
Great, thanks.
It's another Mendoza.
Another Mendoza question. We knew there'd be a lot of those. The Mendoza cap only applies to the class of 2019 and forward, and all current students will not be affected by the cap, correct?
That's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
that is correct. So it would just be for the new group that we're recruiting right now.
Okay, great. And then another question is, do we get many students who give us an early acceptance and then change their minds?
So students that have confirmed their seat to Notre Dame and then have decided to go elsewhere, it's not a huge number.
Okay.
But what we found was we would be offering admission to students that would be, they haven't confirmed their seat yet, but they would go elsewhere because of that early decision.
Okay. And then many students who get accepted early action, they'll just hold on to their decision until they hear from regular action schools as well, right, Brian?
They could, yeah.
Yeah.
That's their choice.
So the deadline for restrictive early action and regular decision is still May 1st for every student?
May 1st for every student.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Great. And I guess, do you anticipate restrictive early action changing your wait list at all?
Yeah, new territory. I wish I could predict what that was going to look like, but we don't know at this point. We anticipate that we might have fewer, less applications in restrictive early action than we did in just regular early action. So we'll have to wait and see how that unfolds. We don't have enough data at this point to be able to say whether it's how that's going to impact the wait list going forward.
Okay. And Eva is wondering what the email for the Yellow Ribbon Program again, and that's just our FinAid.
FinAid at nd.edu. So FINAID at nd.edu. That's where I would encourage the families to send an email to that email address so we can answer questions on that for them.
Right. And also in the training section of our apart.nd.edu site, there is a contacts training brief on each module that you have, and the financial aid contact information and compliance, admissions, everything that you need to know to contact somebody in our enrollment division or on-campus partners is on that contacts page. So.
Yeah, the only thing that I would offer, let's you and I work tomorrow to include a slide on ED2
Okay.
to flesh that out a little bit more
Sure.
and make it a little bit easier to understand.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. So we've got, I think, one last question because we're coming up on 7 o'clock. So what's your target date for anticipating being able to confirm with applicants as to what financial aid is offered to them? So when will students receive their financial aid notifications?
Okay, so we start sending out financial aid notifications after regular action admission is sent out. So towards the middle to the end of March, we start sending out decisions. It's a first in, first out. So we once we have all the information that we need for the families, we start sending them out daily as they're completed. We typically we hold some until regular action is released to the families. We hold those decisions from going out, but we're working on them as soon as we get the applications coming in February. But we start sending them out towards the I think it's around the third week of March. Typically, is when we start sending out financial aid decisions.
Great, and we did have one more question slip in. I think it's a good one. So we'll go ahead. Susan asked, will there be a wait list for Mendoza admission for those who are admitted to the university but not initially Mendoza, if there's space available before the confirmation deadline?
Yeah, I think that's going to happen naturally with our normal wait list, and we would admit off the wait list to fill that spot if it became open. But I think that's going to naturally occur as it does now when we go to the wait list.
Great.
Yeah, good question.
Great. Well, it looks like we're through our questions, and I just want to thank everybody for joining us tonight. I'd like to thank Brian, Heidi, and Michael for their time. This has been really informative. I've learned some things going through here, so I hope that all of you have learned something as well. As I mentioned, the slides will be available tomorrow. Hopefully we'll have the link to the video as well tomorrow so you can share with others who might be attending college fairs. And Brian and I will work on finishing the slides a little bit to make sure that we get information about ED2 and everything that we had questions about tonight. So again, thanks for joining us, and if you have any questions, please feel free to contact me. My Number is 574-631-3401, or it's kputt@nd.edu, kputt@nd.edu, and that again will be on the apart.nd.edu website. So we hope that you have a chance to check that out as well. Thanks again for joining us tonight.